morning, dear friends. Today we would look at Black feminism and Womanism, and also how these two strains of thought lead to intersectionality. And understanding of these various strains of feminist theory helps us to contextualize the development of the idea of gender as we understand it today. Black feminist consciousness recognizes that African American women are status deprived because they face discrimination on the basis of race and gender. The quote of Evelyn M. Simmons also underscores this idea. Black feminists have articulated interlocking systems of oppression. They have talked about sexism, racism, and class discrimination within the all encompassing structures of, as Bell Hooks has suggested, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. So, it is within this over encompassing structure that they look at the interlocking systems of exploitation and oppression. Black women were involved in different movements which ultimately resulted in the rise of the feminist movement and its first phase in the USA. They were associated with suffrage as well as anti-slavery societies. We can refer to the work of Anna J. Cooper also in this context. However, by 1920s, when the white women finally got their right to vote, they stopped supporting anti-lynching positions in order to gain certain political allegiance in the South. And we find that the traditional norms of racism supported the concept of sisterhood. By the mid 20th century, the struggle for social justice in the form of civil rights movement had started significantly. But then it also gave primacy to race and at the same time refused to give leadership positions to women. Black women had continued their struggle against the double oppression of race and gender. The black feminist lens was adopted primarily in 1960s when they felt that they feel doubly excluded from the civil rights movement because of the primacy of race and also because they were denied their due share, and also from the mainstream feminism because they felt that it largely accommodated the demands of the middle class white women. Alice Walker later on coined the term womanism to describe the requirements of the black feminist movement. She had used this term for the first time in her short story, Coming Apart, and later in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Womanist Prose. The term refers to African American feminism or the feminism of women of color, and she explains, I quote, I just like to have words that describe things correctly. Now to me, black feminist does not do that. I need a word that is organic, that really comes out of the culture, that really expresses the spirit that we see in black women, unquote. The term has, of course, expanded in meaning since then. Womanism is not a surrogate for black feminism, though we find that these two concepts are related. Holism, the whole sense of being a woman, is central to womanism. A womanist is aware of her own value as well as of her own femininity. Blackness is implicit in the term. There is no need to preface it with black as is done in black feminism. To Walker, one is womanist when one is committed to the survival and wholeness of entire people, male as well as female. The term includes the survival of both men and women in their distinctiveness. Walker's preference for the term womanist addresses the notion of the solidarity of humanity. This inclusion of men provides black women with an opportunity to address gender oppression without directly attacking men. A phrase by Walker is much cited. Womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. This phrase suggests that feminism is a component beneath the much larger ideological umbrella of womanism and not the other way around. It would be pertinent to quote Laura Gilman at this stage. Gilman comments that universal understandings about women's physical or metaphysical nature are incorrect. There are no fixed, universalizing biological essence behind the idea of femininity or masculinity per se. Similarly, there are no socio-cultural patterns of conduct or activity or structures of feeling that bind all women together as a group. So, whether we celebrate women's biological traits or social attributes in order to compensate for racist and patriarchal representations, or in order to simply deconstruct the dichotomy of mind and nature in order to dismantle the Western binary concepts that have marginalized women in the first place. So, feminists have mistakenly reproduced stereotypical femininity. Gilman has refuted postmodern feminist approaches that dismantle identity, and she advances a material account of social identity emerging from within spatial temporal relations. Womanist theory or womanism considers that femininity and culture are equally significant in the life of a woman. Femininity cannot be separated from culture of which it is a part. So, womanism supports the idea that culture of a woman is the lens through which femininity exists. Culture is not an element of her femininity. It is a focal point of intersection as opposed to class or some other characteristic. As such, according to Walker, a woman's blackness is not a component of her feminism. Instead, her blackness is the lens through which she understands her femininity. Audre Lorde had commented correctly that black feminism is not white feminism in blackface. At this stage, I would like to refer to an essay by Ulla Taylor. The essay is titled Making Waves, the Theory and Practice of Black Feminism. She has summarized four elements of womanism as had been initially pointed out by Walker. Firstly, Walker had suggested that womanism includes a black feminist or a feminist of color. A womanish girl exhibits a willful, courageous, and outrageous behavior that is considered to be beyond the scope of societal norms. The black folk expression is womanish. Often we find that mothers admonish their daughters when they feel that the behavior of their daughter is rather audacious, courageous, or rather willful, and the daughters are acting as grown ups. The expression is the same as you are trying to be grown. So, in the same manner, the womanish girl exhibits a behavior which is beyond the scope of societal norms. Secondly, it is one who appreciates and prefers women's culture. A woman who loves other women sexually and or non-sexually. She appreciates and prefers women's culture, women's emotional flexibility and their strength also. She is traditionally a universalist, not a separatist. It is this aspect which had led to ideological contestations, particularly over the concept of lesbianism. Critics like Emily Toynes, who had supported a spiritual angle to womanism, did not admit to this idea as being a part of a womanist ideology. Thirdly, it is love of culture and self. A woman who loves music, dance, loves the moon, loves the spirit, the folks, and loves herself. Walker's most routinized section of this quadruple expression and the color-coded theoretical parallel that womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender, according to Taylor, is simply a literary device. However, according to the opinion of several critics, this also means that womanism denotes different things. Both purple and lavender have many things are in common, but even then they are different. Purple as a color can also be regarded as a multifaceted erotic symbol, a sign of indomitable female spirit, as well as an encoding of joyous vitality of the female spirit. The dominant motive of womanism is sisterhood, which is inherent in advancement. So, Walker's concept of womanism stresses the sense of solidarity and sharing the sense of community that brings about a blossoming in self and society. In this video, we find that the concept of womanism and the circumstances under which the term came into existence has been explained.
Are you a feminist or a womanist? A question a lot of Black women will inevitably ask themselves while they're exploring feminism. Is womanism just feminism rebranded, or is there a little bit more to it than that? Well, in this video, I'll be explaining and exploring what is womanism. Womanism is a term coined by Alice Walker, who famously wrote the novel The Color Purple. The term first appeared in her book In Search of Our Mother's Garden, Womanist Prose, published in 1983. She created womanism to center Black women in a feminist movement that largely benefited middle-class white women. While Black women also benefited from the feminist movement, their contributions weren't acknowledged, and thus womanism was created. Because white women are often seen as the standard victims of sexism, feminism tends to be very white and rarely considers how Black women specifically deal with being Black and female. This often means Black women participating in larger feminist movements tend to feel as though they have to choose between fighting against racism or sexism. Often because of the erasure of Black women within the feminist movement, Black women participating in feminism sometimes feel like they have to fight against the racism among feminists who don't see the need to include critiques of white supremacy in their fight against gendered oppression. These feminists are referred to as white feminists, not necessarily because they're white, but because their feminism really only seeks to serve white women, while actively overlooking Black women. And that's been consistent through the history of feminism, where Black women were often asked to stand in the back of the line while white women asked for their rights first, and considered the goals of Black women to be antagonistic to their own. Alice Walker defines a womanist as a Black feminist or feminist of color, a woman who loves other women sexually or non-sexually, and sometimes individual men sexually or non-sexually. She is committed to the survival and wholeness of all people, male and female. She isn't a separatist, except periodically for her own health. She loves music, dance, the moon, the spirit, and loves love and food and roundness. She loves struggle, her people, and most of all, she loves herself. It's important to know that while womanism is about loving and appreciating Black women and critiquing the classist and racist aspects of white feminism, it's also about supporting and empowering Black men, who are often integral parts of a Black woman's life and family. When it comes to differentiating between womanism and feminism, Alice Walker says womanism is to feminism as purple is to lavender, meaning that there are only slight differences between being a womanist and being a Black feminist. Womanists largely do support the larger feminist movement and their ultimate goals, but have carved out their own space to specifically center Black women, whereas Black feminists tend to do the same but seek to work within the existing feminist movement and structure.
It can be said that the womanist theory fuses race, sex, and class oppression as forming one single struggle. Walker has provided a basis for other scholars to shape the concept for analysis by implying that womanism has a greater scope as well as intensity in comparison to Black feminism. She has also given literary, critical, as well as philosophical recognition to Black women's intellectual, spiritual, and emotional wholeness. The quality of being universalist gives Black women more strength and power to prove that they are worthwhile despite several criticisms they had to face. She also stresses the need to create a global community where all members of society are encouraged to survive. It has been commented on that the theory of womanism tries to avoid the both and worldview, that is, either or a negation, rather focuses on interaction and wholeness. And it is this aspect of womanism which has attracted several African American women despite having several commonalities with the idea of Black feminism. Despite several commonalities, womanism perhaps is not as relational to feminism as Walker has implied. Rose Brewer has written a very interesting article, Black Feminism and Womenism. In this article, Brewer has quoted Maparian, a scholar of womanist thought, who suggested that there has been a metaphysical architecture of womanism as a form of spiritualized politics, and its distinct logic has often been swallowed into black feminism. Miparian argues that womanism initially started around 1990s when Alice Walker had first coined the term, but in the beginning of the 21st century, around the 2000, it has re-emerged. There is a period also which has predated Walker. And in order to substantiate this idea, she quotes the work which has taken place even before Walker. She cites the work of womanist critics Glenora Hudson Weems and Katie Cannon. Hudson Weems had coined the term Africana womanism in the late 1980s. She had suggested that women of African descent have always been Africana womanists by their very nature. They date back to Africana women in antiquity even before the coinage of the word itself. Another critic who has been referred to by Meparian here is Katie Cannon, who is credited with founding the idea of womanist theology and ethics in a book which was published in 1988. While womanism was pioneered by women of African descent, Meparian does not limit it to Africana feminism. She suggests that it is self authored as well as divinely inspired knowledge, which has a distinct internal logic of black political organizing. But it also challenges the unquestioned dominance of black men in these formations. Taylor, however, comments that despite the contention that womanism is more encompassing, black feminism and womanism would seem to be merely interchangeable empowerment theories. In order to prove this point, Taylor looks at commonalities between these two theoretical stances. Both theories acknowledge that the activism of black women should be based on their cultural heritage, a cultural heritage which rejects docility. It must empower black women to resist their oppression. They also encourage black women to value and love their own self, irrespective of the critique of other people, the society in general. They recognize the responsible commitment a black woman has towards creating a whole community which should be free of any type of dominance. Despite the similarities between these two theoretical paradigms, many womanists continue to disclaim black feminism. Perhaps both black feminism as well as womanism recognize a distinct women's culture, but womanism allows black women to have a femininity which had been denied under feminism. Prior to the modern civil rights movement, enslaved black women were written about by historians as if they were androgynous. Sojourner Truth's feminism acknowledged that slavery denied black women feminine qualities and, in particular, their right to be mothers. By the second wave, white feminists located their oppression in female roles, and several activists connected exterior female attire to their oppression. That is, criticism of women's attire, high heel shoes, etc. But for many black women, their dress or their home were not the principal sites of their oppression. The denial of black women's femininity had been the main vehicle which has been used to exploit their labor power as well as womanhood. It is from this point onward that we look at several aspects of the oppression of a black woman under the systems of slavery, the ramifications of which can be seen even in the contemporary societies. One of the core themes in American black feminist thought is to analyze black women's work, especially their labor market victimization as mules. The controlling image of mules has been a legacy of the slavery days. Mules were dehumanized objects, they were living machines and therefore could be treated as part of the scenery. A fully human woman, a white woman, for example, during the days of slavery, was less easily exploited. The paid work of black women is still organized within the intersecting operations of race, class, and gender. Their overrepresentation in lesser paid work is still a continued reality, and it is a ramification of their racial segregation and slavery. However, within black feminist influenced scholarship, we find that African American women are often presented as being constrained but still empowered figures who are able to have certain dignity even in extremely difficult labor market settings. So, we can say that the historical underpinnings of slavery and racism can be seen in the present day financial status of African American women. African American women were enslaved and humbled like their men, but unlike them, they were forced into sexual roles that threatened to undermine their sense of worth, also turning the experience of motherhood into a trauma. Slave mothers were put in a contradictory and irreconcilable position, as their paternal role was forcibly subordinated to the economic interest of slaveholders. These mothers, as well as their children, were not seen as human beings. Families were separated and destroyed. In this connection, we can refer to Toni Morrison's famous novel Beloved, which views infanticide as a form of liberation, and it remains one of the most poignant fictional testimony to the despair generations of such mothers had faced. Similarly poignant is the portrayal of a woman in a 2013 film, 12 Years a Slave. This film, 12 Years a Slave, is based on the memoir which is written by Solomon Northup. It reveals what happened after Solomon, a free black man living in New York, has been treacherously sold into slavery. So, the film focuses on the protagonist Solomon, but it also has certain women slaves. The clipping which we are using here displays how Eliza and Platt are being sold into slavery to separate slave owners. Eliza Berry was the mother of 2 children. She was cruelly separated from her children when she was sold to a slave owner in Louisiana and was consequently separated from her children. She never recovered from the emotional devastation of losing her children, mourning them till the last days of her life and dying without ever seeing them.
Ah, Mr. Ford. Splendid seeing you, sir. What captures your fancy? This lad is very brawny, yeah?
How much are the ones, Platt and Eliza?
Ah, yes. 1,000 for Platt. Oh, this is a nigger of considerable talent, I assure you. 700 for Eliza? My fairest price?
You will accept a note?
Please,
of course,
sir,
from you, Mr.
do not
Ford.
divide my family. Do not take me unless you take my children.
Eliza, quiet!
You will have the most faithful slave of me, the most
Liza.
faithful slave that's ever lived, but I beg that you
Your
do
price
not
for the boy.
separate
Yes, the
us. Please.
Stop it! I will give you something to cry about. Randall, come forward. Come. Now, you see how fit this boy is. Like ripe fruit. May I take your stick a moment? Observe this, Randall. Jump, run. Very good. Higher. You see this? Very likely. He will grow into a fine beast. 600 for the boy. Fair and final.
Done.
Superb. A moment, please. Mr. Ford.
Please.
Eliza!
How much for the little girl? You have no use for her. One so young will bring you no profit.
No. I cannot sell the girl. No, there's heaps and piles of money to be made from her. She's a beauty, one of the regular bloods. None of your thick-lipped, bullet-headed, cotton-picking niggers here.
A child, man.
Please.
For God's sake, you're not sentimental in the least.
My sentimentality extends the length of a coin. Now, do you take this lot, Mr. Ford, or do you pass on them all?
Please.
I will take the ones, Platt and Eliza.
Sold, Eliza and Platt. Splendid.
Do not take that from me.
Get her out.
I would also like to refer to slave narratives, which comprise one of the most influential traditions in American literature, shaping the form and themes of some of the most celebrated and also controversial writing, both in fiction and in autobiography, in the history of the USA. From 1760s to the end of the Civil War in the US, approximately 100 autobiographies of fugitives or former slaves had appeared. After slavery was abolished in 1865, at least 50 former slaves wrote or dictated book-length accounts of their lives. With the rise of the abolition movement in the early 19th century, a growing demand was felt for hard-hitting eyewitness accounts of the harsh realities of slavery. The American slave narratives center on the narrative's rite of passage from slavery in the South to freedom in the North. Slavery is documented as a condition of extreme deprivation, necessitating increasingly forceful resistance. And after a harrowing and suspenseful escape, the slave's attainment of freedom is signaled not only by reaching the free states but also by taking a new name and a dedication to anti slavery movements. The narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave written by himself, which was published in 1845, is often considered to be the epitome of the slave narratives. It also creates a lasting ideal of an African American hero who is committed to intellectual as well as physical freedom as he wants to pursue literacy. However, a couple of years afterwards, in 1855, Douglass also wrote another book, My Bondage and My Freedom, to recount his continuing struggle for freedom against Northern racism. The most widely read and hotly disputed American novel of the 19th century, Uncle Tom's Cabin, was also profoundly influenced by the slave narratives. Harriet Beecher Stowe had been influenced by her reading of these narratives, and she also owed several graphic incidents and models for some of these memorable characters. Most of these slave narratives were written and published by men. In 1861, it was Harriet Jacobs who became the first African American female slave to author her narrative depicting her resistance to her master's sexual exploitation and also her ultimate achievement of freedom for herself and for her two children. During the slavery, African American women were exploited as economic resources and they also faced violence as a woman. This consistent denial of essential resources has resulted in their exclusion and manipulation. Derisory or absent incomes for many blacks has become a main issue of their social life even now. This has created several frustrations within the community and also has repercussions on the management of the families and results in what is normally called as matriarchal poor family. A prominent American novelist, Gloria Naylor, has underscored the gendered exploitation of women in her novels, highlighting the significance of economic stability for black women in novels like Women of Brewster Place, Linden Hills, and Mama Day. So, African American writers suggest a framework of feminism which opposes not only gender hierarchies but also racial and economic hierarchies. They also recognize the culturally specific experiences of women across cultures. This aspect of feminism, US third world feminism, or to use Walker's term womanism, is articulated in the fiction of several African American writers. For example, Toni Morrison, Sandra Cisneros, Louis Erdrich, etc. Their constructions of gender identity arise from and also vary with the construction of community in their work. In several novels, we also find a disruption of traditional gender roles. For example, we can refer to The Color Purple, an epistolary novel by Ellis Walker, which has also been adapted into a film by Steven Spielberg, and a musical version has also been produced by Oprah Winfrey. Many characters in the novel break the boundaries of traditional gender roles as male or as female. We can refer to Sophia's strength, Shug's sexual assertiveness, as well as Harpo's insecurity. This context would be further discussed in detail in the next week when we will discuss the idea of gender blurring. We can also refer to the work of Bernardine Evaristo, a more contemporary British writer known for her innovative writing style. Her diasporic and pluralistic heritage is also reflected in her work, and she is often compared with the new generation of British born black writers like Andrea Levy or Jackie Kay, who feel both of and not of this country, to quote Carol Phillips. So, for Evaristo, to be black and to be British is not a contradiction, and her themes also suggest a continuity in terms of womanism. Her novel Girl, Woman and Other has received the 2019 Booker Prize Award alongside Margaret Atwood's The Testament. This is a panoramic as well as a polyphonic novel following the lives of 12 different characters living in the UK throughout several decades. These characters are mostly in complex mother and daughter relationship, and through them the writer is trying to look at the 120 years of British history. Each of these characters is a descendant of black immigrant who had come to the country a long time before. The female characters in the novel deal with oppression and stigma in several ways, in the same manner as has been pointed out by African American writers. But they do not subscribe to the role of powerless victims, but are critical to the world around them. They are also aware of a need to talk about their subordinate position, name it, and also oppose it, particularly when it has become a part of them as internalized self oppression. She also looked at different degrees and various forms of oppression and underprivileged status through these characters. The continuity of such intertwining bases of oppression leads us to intersectionality, a term which had been coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. An intersectional approach shows the way that people's social identities can overlap and create compounding experiences of discrimination. The concept of intersectionality offers a lens through which we can see the manner in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. To quote Crenshaw, all equality is not created equal. Further, she says, we tend to talk about race inequality as separate from inequality based on gender, class, sexuality, or immigrant status. What's often missing is how some people are subject to all of these, and the experience is not just the sum of its parts. Unquote. It is this idea of intersectionality which we will carry forward and discuss in the coming module. Thank you.